Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the AIM Growth Partners podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Jill Osterhout, the CEO and founder of KCO Resource Management. Jill, welcome to the show.
David, thank you for having me.
So I gave a very brief introduction there. So you run a global recruitment business and you started it 18 years ago. I think arguably one of the worst times to maybe start any business, but specifically a recruitment business, right in the midst of the financial crisis. So I guess, first of all, let's start with that. Let's start with, kind of what led you and what kind of compelled you to set up a recruitment business, and particularly during this troubling time.
So that is right. We did begin, opened our doors, so to speak, during the recession of 2008, 2009. And I know that sounds counterintuitive. Like, why would you start a business when this is happening in the US and across the world? I had always been very entrepreneurial. Was very young. I always knew I wanted to work for myself, and I had been out in the work world and had an established career already. But my last role was in recruiting for a pharmaceutical medical device type of recruitment company. So I loved recruiting, but I didn't love those industries. But I felt like this was the career path for me that I wanted to finally take and start my own business with. But I didn't want to do it in those industries. So as a consumer, I'd always supported and purchased organic, natural products and food. And I thought that would be what I wanted to infuse into my own company, is what I believed in personally and what my ethics aligned with. I would love to have my work week, my work weekends be about things I already believed in. And so food, I was, back in the 90s, I was the person in the green grocer, a local store buying organic food when, that wasn't a very mainstream or popular thing. So I felt very good about that being what I was going to spend my time building a business in. And I thought, if I can start this in a recession, I can start this when the economy is not great, then this is definitely a staple business and would only flourish when things pick back up. And that's exactly what happened. We were able to have a foothold and open our doors and become successful really our first year. And that was during a recession. And so in a way, it's kind of made us be this a little bit of a foolproof sort of company, but it also taught us our biggest lesson, which is the economy, businesses. It's a very up and down thing. And so if you always operate with the mindset of, I have to be able to keep my doors open when it's down, if you always operate from that level, then when things do improve, it's just an added bonus. But when things do go down in an economy or in an industry, you're not so vulnerable. So it actually ended up being this extremely valuable lesson.
Interesting, the decision behind, transitioning into an industry where you didn't have prior experience aside from just being, a consumer. So talk me through those early years. Obviously, the market was very difficult, very challenging. How important was that alignment, alignment with personal values? You talked about natural and organic. How important was that alignment with the mission of what you were doing and the industries you were recruiting for to weather the storm on those tricky first few years?
Yes. So I guess being that consumer, so understanding the industry from many years of having shopped in the aisles and looked at the back of ingredients lists and purchased those things, I knew a certain amount already just from that perspective. The goal in starting out was to go solely into natural organic food and beverage, CPG, consumer packaged goods. So that's when you go into the grocery store, those are all your products that are available to you at the consumer packaged good level. When I first started out, one of our earlier clients was a dairy company that was formulating a new type of yogurt. You might have heard of them. They're called Chobani. And so we started working with them when they were 50, 50 people in an old craft plant in Western New York, and they were growing exponentially fast. And so we started developing this specialty in dairy products, specifically yogurt. And so I think the understanding of the food and beverage industry from the business side evolved So we hadn't intentionally gone into a subspecialty of dairy, but I knew as a consumer, oh, this is a great product. This is a great idea. I'm buying this right now and I would love to keep buying this. And I saw how excited I was about it. And so things like that from that consumer perspective, I kept putting into my the business side of how would I feel about this as a consumer. And then I think when you have a value set that is about, I want my personal ethics to always be partnered with my business ethics, I think that when that is how you lead, that's how you make your decisions. I feel like that's a strong um base to build from. So we have had to be flexible with how we're working and what sorts of companies we are working on, because even though my initial intent was natural and organic, technically Chobani isn't organic, but it is a natural product, and technically all of the dairy products that we worked with aren't labeled organic or natural. But if I felt good about the product and what was being put out there for the consumer, then I thought, okay, if I will buy this as a consumer, then I would like to support it on the business side. And I always led with that as sort of my North Star.
I love that. And it's so nice that creating that sort of alignment with your own kind of personal values, and it sort of makes sense as to why that helps fuel the mission. The recruitment industry is an incredibly tough industry at the best of times. Obviously, you didn't start in the best of times. So, talk me through then. You talked about the early years and the importance of having that alignment. But, how long was it before you really got the business off the ground?
So opening the doors day one, what I didn't have was specific business experience from the CPG food industry, but what I did have was recruiting experience. So I knew how to recruit. It was a little bit of a slow burn for the first several months. Like any new business, you're kind of getting your footings, making sure systems that you're setting up are working. But then we actually were very, very lucky. We happened upon some early big name clients that were also growing very fast, and we developed good relationships with them very early. So our first year out of the gate, we were very profitable year one. And part of that is from that alignment in the dairy industry where we started working with dairy manufacturers that are making yogurt. A lot of people that are not in this food and beverage, specifically dairy industry, might not know all of the history about what was happening in the market with the yogurt industry. But if you think back to, let's go back 15 years ago or 20 years ago, if you would go into the grocery store or the supermarket and go to pick out a yogurt, it was a very small selection. Maybe you would have blueberry or strawberry or vanilla. Maybe there was like 3 different manufacturers that made this yogurt. So we started working in the yogurt dairy industry right when a lot of companies were saying, hey, there's different types of yogurts. There's Greek yogurts. Maybe we can do add-ins. And so there was this evolution and revolution that was actually happening in the yogurt industry, which is it was very exciting at the time, and it went on for many years, and we rode that wave that was happening with a lot of our companies. So from year one, we were working with companies that are just having this crazy growth. And so we were able to partner with them. And that's part of how we became experts in the dairy industry, is from having so many roles that we just were exclusively working on for things like yogurt quality manager or R&D of yogurt products, and it just was extremely exciting. And so that's why now when you walk into grocery stores, the yogurt aisle it's like 20 or 30 feet long, and there's savory options, and there's, it's used to just be yogurt was breakfast. And now it's yogurt can be breakfast, it can be a snack, it can be part of an appetizer. People are mixing it into dinner options. It's a dessert. It's become its own complete new sector. And it's almost hard to think back to what it used to be and what we used to think of it as. So we were part of that. There's always in business, I heard one time, and I think it was actually Oprah that said this. It was like when preparation meets opportunity, and that's sometimes where success lies. And so I think that was part of our magic of what happened in the early years, why we never really had to struggle much from day one when we opened our doors, is because we were prepared, but we also had an opportunity. And so that was somewhat of a lucky thing for us that we've been able to develop an expertise in and are very grateful for.
And how then over the years after that initial success, and I think that's phenomenal that, achieving that kind of level of profitability in your first year, as you mentioned, the first several months is a bit of a slog. So, I mean, kudos to you for that. And it sounds like a perfect combination, as you mentioned, of right place, right time, right knowledge and skill set applied to the right market. How did the business kind of expand over the following years then with all this kind of profit? Presumably you kind of invested, grew the business out. As the business grew, did you stay specifically in the yogurt and the dairy industry, or how did that growth happen?
Right. So year one, we were so busy out of the gate that my business partner slash husband actually started year one, started helping, working with me, and then within the first year actually fully transitioned over and became my full business partner. That's how crazy our growth was from year one. And I've always looked at I don't know where I heard this statistic, but I always had this in my head that like 5% of new businesses actually are still existing 5 years down the road. And so that meant 95% of new businesses were not existing. So I always took that mentality that I came in with from this recession, greater economy, that you always have to be prepared for that to be part of your story again, that the economy is going to go up, the economy is going to go down. And so we always carefully added or didn't add to our team because we always wanted it to be a stable, long term, generational business. So, where there were many times where we could have become 2 and 3 times our size, we've chosen not to because our goal is always to provide the same level of personal, relational interactions with our clients and our candidates. And we want to make sure people on our team are aligned with that. And that when they come to work with us, that they know that we're stable and that they're committing to a long-term business. And so our average time people have spent with us is 10 years. So that's yeah, and so I love having a business that we can watch what's happening in the news and we can go, "Okay, that's scary. I know that's scary for a lot of people, but we're okay. You're okay here." Like I love having that ability to say, "We're good. We're gonna be good. We can weather things for a very long period of time." And so it insulates us from having to make rash decisions with our business, from having to hire and then fire people, let people go unintentionally, not wanting to, do that to people. Just the same ethics that I had personally, as far as like I would like this to be an organic product or a natural product. That's how I look at people also. So there's the people that work with us that I don't even really see as employees per se, like they're friends to me and we're part of because we are a family business, my husband and I, it feels like a work family. And I know that is a terminology with a lot of the newer generations that people feel like that's not a real thing. But to us, that is a real thing. All of the people that work for us, we know what's going on with their kids and they know what's going on with our kid. And it's like a very, like we care about each other's lives. And that's how we also extend that to clients and candidates. So with our candidates, even though they don't pay us any money, our money comes from clients hiring us to fill specific roles. So let's say it's a VP of sales, or let's say it's an R&D director. Those roles, the money that we're being paid for, it's coming from the client, but we treat the client and the candidate the same. We respect them, we're transparent with them, we try and really be, give them the level of honesty and human decency and respect that I think we all deserve. And so a client, of course, probably is expecting that to some extent, but the candidates, we also want to give them that same level of all of those things that we believe in because I know that this is someone trusting us with information. They're asking us to help them, whether it's move to a different career stage or maybe they're thinking of relocating their family or that will mean that their spouse or their partner will have to give up their job or their kids will have to change schools or they have to sell their house. And so all of those things we take into account and know. So we want to make sure that we give even our candidates a very open, respectful process. And I think that's been part of our success too, because a lot of our candidates that maybe we have one job, but maybe we've talked to 30 people for that one role. Those 30 people now are going to end up someplace else, maybe. Or maybe they're currently at a company and then it's their turn to have an open role. And they go, I really appreciated the experience as a candidate from KCO. I know they were honest. I know that they were transparent. I know that they respected my time and respected me as a candidate. So I want my candidates to have that same experience. And I also now know as a client, I can trust them, what they're sending to me, what they're saying to me. They're doing the work. And a lot of our growth and our success is coming from just referrals from people we've talked to, worked with. That is, we've done very little outside advertising ever. Mm. So I think those pieces marry together to give you a very firm base. And that's why we're here, like you said, 18 years later, and we're a good team and we're a strong team and we're here for a long period of time, generally, generationally.
So you consciously stayed lean, you stayed profitable because you're playing the long game, you're creating a generational business. So I guess that kind of transitions us on nicely to the importance and what KCO does around understanding the needs of the workforce and the different generational needs and requirements.
Right. Yes, that is something that is a very important piece of what we do. Understanding different generations and understanding the needs and things that different generations I think are important and are looking for. And it's actually, I think, a very normal thing. And every generation has their own things that they go, I don't want to do it like the generation before. But I think before it was smaller, the differences. And now it's becoming like each generation wants like a bigger it wants to take a bigger step away from the previous generation. I was working so I'm Gen X. I was working for boomers. And so when I went out into the work world, I went in not questioning anything. It was set up a certain way and I knew I'm going to have to get coffee and make 1,000 photocopies. And even though that was not not my job title at all, I just was prepared for anything and I was in it to, in 10 years, I'm going to do such a great job. In 10 years, I'll be the person that they want to promote. You had this very not, you didn't go into it questioning a lot, I think. And then I think for Gen X, though, you got in there and you thought, maybe we could do this differently. Well, maybe this doesn't have to be like that. And a lot of those thoughts I had when I worked for someone else, I brought into when we started this company. And so there was a lot like baked in from day one, flex time, like, oh, you have a doctor's appointment, just flex it. Vacation, a lot of PTO, a lot of company holidays, a lot of understanding that you're a human and you have a family or you have a life and we're a business. Like, let's work really hard while we're here and what the business needs. But we also really understand that you're a human. And whereas, when I was coming into the work world, like there was very little understanding of your life outside of work. It was you give everything to work and there's very little understanding of anything that happens outside of that. And I think Gen X really did a lot for people to be comfortable being a human and having human needs, that constant like you're not a bad employee just because your kid gets sick 5 times in a year. You're not a bad person because you happen to need surgery the same year your husband needs back surgery or something like that. Like, so I think Gen X did a lot for making those things, like normalized into the work world. But what I see now with the newer generations coming up, the millennials, the Gen Zs, the alphas, whereas I think Gen X was saying, hey, we can work, but also we can be human. Like these things can also happen at the same time. I think the younger generations are pushing for things that there's a question with, I think, the boomer and the Gen X generation saying, yes, but can we still operate a business and give you those things, right? Like I think there's a stronger like pull in the middle. And I think it's like companies are trying it to give a lot of things to these younger generations. And then some are pulling back. They're like the pendulum swung too far. And I think that you see that now with the return to work, whereas I think that's kind of part of that generational struggle because boomers and Gen X were used to just only being in the office with each other. And the younger generations are saying, "Oh, no, we can work at home," which is true for many positions, but also true for not true for many positions. And I think that's where you're kind of seeing some of that difference in generational opinions. So it's an interesting time because we've got a very big generational divide on many issues, and I think we're all trying to figure out exactly where do we land with some of these things. Like how much can a company give someone? How much do they owe someone? And then younger generations are saying, how much do I want to give? How much am I willing to hand over? So it's still in process, and I think it's always going to be. It's just like a swinging pendulum. Where do you land right now? And I think wherever we land right now, if we had this conversation in 5 years, it would be it would be different a little bit, right? It's ever evolving.
And it sounds like the role of a recruitment agency acting as the broker, trying to get a win-win situation when actually the priorities and the ambitions are entirely different. Of you want to work from home, have all this PTO, you want them entirely in the office, actually maybe doing 2 or 3 days in the office. It's a lose-lose. So it's like, how do you facilitate that win-win relationship whereby you're not siding with the candidate or with the client? It sounds like that's an incredibly difficult sort of challenge you face.
Yes, our role as a recruiter is, do we have opinions? Yes, but our role is really a facilitator. We introduce. We screen, we assess, and then we try and make matches, but it's really up to each of the candidate and the client to make the decisions, to have the opinions. We can offer suggestions of some thoughts, some things to consider. We can give antidotes of things that we've encountered before that they might want to enter into the process. And so bringing up return to work and work from home, that's a big piece for a lot of people right now. And so maybe for one role, we can say to a client, they're looking for just one day at home. I know you said you wanted this to be fully in the office, but prior to this, it was, it did have some days at home. Now you're getting this level candidate, you're getting the person you want, 4 days in the office, one day from home. Is there a reason why that wouldn't work? Is there a reason why, and maybe they'll say, well, everyone has to, we'd have to give that to everyone. Or maybe they would say, You know what? Look, we did offer this before. And I know we said we were looking for a fully return to work, but you know what? You're right. This is the candidate we want. And 4 days, we can still make it work. We just try and offer things to think about. Sometimes they take our advice, sometimes they don't, in both directions. Sometimes we'll say to the kid, this is the job you want. You told us day one, this has all of the things you want, the salary you want, the title you want, the responsibilities you want. Is there a reason why you want that one day from home? And if the reason is just, no, I really like it, I just wanted that. Well, is it worth giving up all these other things? Just something to think about. So it's just us entering into the thought process and helping to bridge maybe gaps in alignment is really what our goal is.
So change sounds like the changes or the generational changes has evolved the role of a recruiter and added additional complexities. I'm interested in understanding as all these generational shifts have happened, technology and the digital world has certainly not stayed stagnant. How has that impacted your role and your responsibilities as a recruiter?
Yes. So, we were talking about before about generations and how that's, evolved over time and technology. I have been part of that generation that went into the work world that looked one way. Now it looks totally different. So I can speak from personal experience. A lot of the work I did initially was file folders and post-it notes and paper and pen. And we had like old DOS programs on the computer. Like nothing was streamlined or easy. There was just like a lot of manual stuff happening. So it's been a slow process changing over time, but I think if you're always willing to change whatever the technology that is sort of the thing out there that can help you do your work more efficiently or faster or easier, or you can spend your time on other more valuable things. You have to stay open to that. And so we always had. So even though, I started work in one way and I now work a totally different way. And here we are. Would I say some things are better and some things are not as good with the internet? I think so. Our default is to say internet, electronic things, that's all makes our life better. But there's lots of days where you're like your computer's not working, or you need tech help, and I would on those days I would say just wish I had a file folder and a piece of paper and a pen. And then with AI, I think is sort of like the new version of the internet changing how we work. And we're in the baby years of this where we know what it is. It's becoming part of our work world. We don't all quite understand it. We don't quite understand how big it's going to get, how much it's going to change how we work. We're still trying to, I think, wrap our minds around how to use it, who's using it in what way. I think we're all a little suspicious right now. Like, is this an AI generated something or is this come from a human? Does it matter? Does it not matter? And so there's the piece of this that's about like, let's stay open to new technology. And if I can spend many less hours doing something extremely tedious, then hey, that could be a great thing. But if it starts taking over things that are supposed to be human, then maybe that's not a great thing. And I think there's an element of this that's let's use it for how it will help us, but let's not let it take over our world in a way that maybe we shouldn't. And I'll just say this as far as like an example. So we have like kids that have smartphones, and we need to ask the question of, so they have a smartphone, it has all the games. This is how they communicate with their other friends. So that's a good thing, right? Or maybe is it not a good thing? It's that question of how much should a kid be on a cell phone? How much should a kid be on a handheld device versus being made to play outside, or having a in-person play date, or playing a game at the kitchen table with a family versus, being alone in their room on their phone all the time. Like, those are questions we should ask to see what is it that really is. Just because you can do it doesn't mean we should do it. And I think that's AI. Like, just because it's here and can do certain things, do we want it to do certain things? Like for recruiting, and I don't think it's not there yet, but if we're looking ahead in the future, it could be something where I have a system, let's say I'm a hiring manager. I have a system that has resumes, and I put in my search words, and the AI determines which resumes I see. And then the AI runs those through a personality, decides to contact certain people, and then runs those people through a personality test, and then takes those results and determines, okay, this is the candidate for you. And so I, as a human, now have another human that I barely had any interaction with. And then on the other side, candidates are entering their resumes into these systems, and the AI is determining which jobs that they should apply to. And so they're applying to jobs that they as a human haven't necessarily determined that they should apply to. And so if you keep funneling that through forward, you could have two humans that, oh, I'm ready to offer you a job, and I'm hearing you offer me a job, and where there's been very little interaction and very little human decision happening. And so that's where we need to question, like, how much of that do we actually want to be part of the process? So I think it's an interesting thing that's happening, and it's going to be evolving. But I think this time we need to be an active decision maker in the AI revolution.
So it sounds like your stance on future proofing the business and getting the best out of it is using it as a tool. And to use your example of the mobile phone, it can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. So proceed with caution seems your kind of stance.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's something that absolutely could be very helpful and beneficial, just like the internet. But it's something that, just like a lot of things in the world and life, it's not a black and white thing. There's a lot of gray. And as humans, we should be involved in that gray and make active decisions about it, rather than just let it run forward and end up in a place maybe that we don't really want to be in. Like, let's take our time and understand things completely and move forward as a culture and a society and as humans in a way that it's like, okay, this is what we want it for. This is what we need it for. And these are the things, even though it can do, let's not let it do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to circle back to something you just said there previously, because it's been stuck with me. It's almost this paradox of, the more we use AI in the example you gave of, hiring managers feeding this information into a CRM or into a CV database, go find me the perfect candidate that matches these skills. Meanwhile, the candidates are uploading their job. But the irony is the more we rely on AI, the more we're making ourselves like robots. Looking ahead to, I don't know, say we're in the year 2030, if we do enter into a world like the one you painted there, where there's a disconnect between hiring managers and candidates, it's all managed on an AI portal and it's their sort of matchmaking activity happens there. What do you think is going to be missed from the human component in the recruitment process? And what benefits do you think humans will have in the year 2030 if all of this can be automated?
I think a disconnect happens from day one in a process, an interviewing, hiring process. And if a candidate doesn't feel valued from day one, like they just feel like, well, I'm just a number that a computer determined that I was the best match. And this company, that's how they're making their decisions. They're letting computers decide a lot of things, including, today is a day we're going to lay off people because the numbers generate mean X. So let's do X. Like, I think the trust that people have in other people, the that connection, that is more than just a personal thing. I think in the business world, a lot of people enter into, share information, confide in people, move forward in business partnerships, accept a job, determine that they want to hire someone because of the human factor. And then when you're working with people, especially if you're in a smaller company, the larger the company is, the less a human has an individual ability to impact things. That just is how it goes and probably will always be like that. But a lot of the small and mid-sized guys, which there's a ton of them, if anything, probably more people work for small and mid-sized companies than for the big guys. Like, we think about the big guys, we talk about the big guys, but a lot of people, their experience is being at a smaller or mid-sized companies. And the loyalty of someone wanting to stay at a company, it's not just because of a salary and a job title. That only holds people so much. And I think that is part of what the younger generations are saying. Like, it has to be more for me. I have to feel like I align with the company's ethics. I have to feel like I am a person and I'm cared for, and that my individual worth is matters. And so I think if AI is too much a part of the process, if anything that's technology based is too much a part of the process, you lose that feeling, and it happens and it starts from day one. So I think that's a very important thing for companies to think about. You're not hiring this resume, even though you're hiring the person behind the resume. And so it's very easy for people to not feel loyal to a company if they don't feel like, as a person, that they're valued at all.
And I think you've really kind of highlighted there the importance of maintaining the human in the loop. And I'm sure you can relate, but I know personally for me, when I was sending candidates into an interview, advising this is what the hiring manager is going to be like. They're going to be very stern. They're not going to give much away. You can give them that sort of guidance. I don't think would ever be able to give that level of detail, or it wouldn't be incentivized to do so. But similarly, on the back end, get a call from a candidate immediately after an interview. Don't think he liked me. I think it went awfully. Why? Because he was deadpan or she was deadpan. No, I've worked with them for years. That's what they're like. That reassurance and that level of interaction, I don't think someone would go and talk to an AI chatbot and say, I feel this way. And I think that's what creates that stickiness. That's what creates that candidate experience and client experience that makes people want to come back, and ultimately has been what's kept you so successful and your business so successful over the last 18 years.
And look, you can have um, a computer give you 30 resumes. You can have a person give you 30 resumes, and then, in an opinion, you can have the computer, the AI generated opinion, but then you lose the back and forth. Like you said, my opinion comes with antidotes and experience, and the AI opinion comes with antidote and experiences that you're reading through, but I think that there's something that doesn't quite hit or connect when you're reading something versus when you're speaking it, and I just think that there's something lost, and I don't do we wanna give that up?
Mm.
Do
Well, I think we all inherently want to be challenged, don't we? And whether we admit it or not, if we look at like our personal relationships, whether it's our kind of our lovers, our friends, whatever, on some level, basic human level, we want to be challenged. And although hiring managers can sometimes be quite difficult, they might not convey that. I think if you've got a yes person of an AI bot of this person won't work because of X, actually you going back and saying, I really think you should at least speak to them and interview them. It will then become apparent why I put them forward. You know, their resume doesn't scream of they're a perfect fit, but when you speak to them, you'll see why I sent them over. And it's that sort of that's the real value in having a killer recruiter working for you. It's not just the CV resume screening ability and sending it over. It's that more nuanced understanding the person, understanding the desires and whatnot.
you said that excellently.
Thank you. And I guess wrapping up, Jill, we've gone on such an evolution here from, when you started the business in the deep, dark days of, the recession, going into an industry where you haven't previously worked, but something that was aligned to your personal values. You talked about how you've successfully, maintained and, built up the business over the years, but with the key, once again, aligning with your philosophy of staying lean, staying profitable, and staying true to your values. We spoke about how AI, well, technology, and then later AI has already shaped or created some noise in the market. I guess to wrap up, whether it's for recruitment leaders or entrepreneurs generally, what are the greatest bits of advice of your 18 years of being an entrepreneur would you impart or leave our listeners with?
Good question. I think that no matter what your business model is, if you go into it with a set of intentions, and I had mentioned a North Star before, what is that thing for you? What is your North Star? Because you are going to come into situations and decisions that you have to make choices. And so you always want to know how you want to operate as a business. So I think that's very important for me. That helped us make several decisions that were tough ones where we said, you know what, we don't feel comfortable with this situation. We're not going to work with this company anymore. And had we not, could that have tarnished our reputation if we had chosen to work with them? Or there's been situations where we pull back because we don't agree or feel right. And I think that all comes down to I had a very clear North Star from the beginning, which was to me, business and personal ethics and values are the same and they don't have to be separate. So that has been, I think, a very strong piece of why we are still here and have been successful. So that I think sometimes people think of it as like a mission statement, but I think of it as a North Star. What is leading you? The other thing is you have to remember the ups and downs always historically. And sometimes it's happening within a year, sometimes it's happening over the course of a decade, but things are always going to go up and down. So you always operate from whatever the baseline is. If you can sustain when things are not so great out there, then when they are great, then that's when you had mentioned before, save and invest and all of those things in your company, but just be very well prepared. Don't get fooled by the right now it's things are amazing, so we're going to hire a ton of people too fast, too quick. Like, be patient, wait it out. Wait till you know that this is something you really can afford to do. You really can bring into your business. Grow responsibly. And then you won't have a lot of that small business entrepreneurial stress that I think comes with it. Look, entrepreneurs are inherently risk takers. And I think to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be comfortable with risk, but you could also turn that into something that is there's small risks and big risks. So like you can operate within the small risks a lot more manageably if you make those choices early on. So those would be some of the big pieces of advice I would give to people. And also, n- this is my last thing I'll say is no matter who the person is, whether it's someone that works with you, a vendor, a client, another person involved in your process for your business, just remember They are a human, and I think if we treated each other with more kindness and respect and dignity, I feel like that's a ripple effect. And I think you don't do it because, like, I think having that mindset a lot has rippled back to us in that same way, like business karma. Don't do it because of that reason, but know that that's an effect that happens.
Absolutely. I think that's such fantastic advice to leave people with. Keep your risk profile in check. Don't get too carried away with that. And essentially be a good person, I think was what I took away from that.
Yes, David, thank you so much. And I just want to say you've had some great insights too. So thank you for having me on, and I've really enjoyed it.
My pleasure.